Part 2 of section 1.6. So we have one more type of equation to talk about solving. Those are what we call radical equations. So we call an equation a radical equation if we have a radical somewhere in the equation that has a variable underneath it. So somehow we have to get the variable out from under the radical. Okay, so our strategy to do that is we're going to raise both sides of our equation to a power. And we're going to choose the appropriate power to cancel out the radical. So that's going to be our strategy. We're going to raise both sides to the appropriate power. And again, like with rational equations, it's possible we'll get some quote-unquote solutions that don't actually work. So we want to check our solutions always. It's a good idea to check your solutions anyway, no matter what type of equation you're solving. But for sure, on radical equations and on rational equations, you need to check the solutions because you could work it perfectly, but the solution still not work. Okay, so let's look at a couple of these. So what do these look like? Well, here's a simple one. We've got square root of 6x minus 2 equals 8. Okay. So first, we're already in good shape on this one, but if your radical is not by itself, you want to get the radical on one side of the equation all by itself. That needs to be step one. Here we already have that situation. So once we have that, the next thing to look at is what power do we need to use to cancel out this radical. So remember a square root, okay, its index is a 2. Right? So we don't write it, but we could write a little 2 right there, right? Square root. So that means in order to cancel our radical out, we're going to raise both sides to the second power. We're going to square both sides. Okay. When we do that, it's easy on the left. Just the square and the square root cancel out, and it just leaves us 6x minus 2. On the right side, 8 times 8, that's 64. Okay. Once we get rid of the radical, this is just your typical linear equation here. So we're going to add 2 to both sides. Do that, we get 66. Divide both sides by 6. Okay, old news at this point, so our 6's cancel. X we think is 11. Okay, but we need to check our solution and make sure it works. Okay, so this says 6 times 11 is 66 minus 2, and that should equal 8. So if we check it, this is the square root of 64. Yep, and 1 squared to 64 is 8, so this one does work out. X equals 11 is a solution here. Okay, but you have to check. Okay, you have to check because sometimes you'll get things that don't work when you check it. Okay, one more here. And so this one says 2x equals 1 minus square root of 2 minus x. Okay, so remember the very first thing we need to do is to get the radical by itself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides here. It's okay if we have a negative on the radical because we can take care of that pretty easily. But we want the radical by itself. So here again we have a square root. Okay. If we have, we have a cube root, we would raise both sides to the third. If we have a fourth root, we would raise both sides to the fourth power. Okay, we have square roots here, so we're going to raise both sides to the second power. So square the left, square the right. On the left, unfortunately, You have to be careful here because squaring something means you're multiplying it by itself. So what this means is that we're doing 2x minus 1 times 2x minus 1. The answer is not 4x squared plus 1. Okay, we have to do FOIL method over here. So we get 4x squared, and then we have minus 2x on the outer terms, minus 2x from the inner terms, and plus 1 from the last terms. Okay, we have to do FOIL method there. On the right side though, what's going to happen? Well, we're going to cancel out the square root, and also remember, if you square a negative number, like negative 2 times negative 2, it makes it positive, so that negative sign goes away also. We just end up with 2 minus x over here. Okay. And now we just need to combine like terms. So on the left, we'll combine those. It's minus 4x in the middle. And then looks like we have a quadratic equation again, so we need to move everything to one side. So if we add x to both sides, get 4x squared minus 3x, negative 4x plus x. Okay. And then 1, we're subtract 2 from both sides, so 1 minus 2 gives us negative 1. Okay. And here, okay, not super easy to factor, it doesn't look like, so maybe quadratic formula is a good choice. And I'm okay with that. That's not my favorite, but I'm okay with it. So negative b, so our b, let's label them. Okay, we got a, b, c. So negative b, b is negative 3, so we get positive 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 squared, use parentheses, minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is negative 1, all over 2 times a, which is 4. Okay, so now we'll simplify. So negative 3 squared is 9. Okay, and then we have negative 4 times 4 is negative 16, times negative 1 is positive 16. And this is over 8. So it looks like we could have factored, but we've got square root of 25 here, which is 5. So we've got 3 plus or minus 5 over 8. So what do we think our two solutions are? 3 plus 5 is 8 over 8, so that would be 1. Okay. And then 3 minus 5 would be negative 2 over 8, so that would be negative 1/4. These are our two potential solutions. Okay, but remember we have to check these. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's try 1 first. Okay, if we plug in 1, over here we're going to get 2. If we plug in 1 underneath the radical, 2 minus 1 would be 1. Square root of 1 is 1. We get 1 minus 1. Uh-oh. What's going on there? We get 2 equals 0, so that's not going to work. Okay, not going to work. So 1 is not a solution. Okay, what about negative 1/4? Again, use your calculator if it's something messy like this, but okay, so we're doing negative 1/4, and that's going to be negative 2/4, so negative 1/2 equals 1 minus, okay, I'm going to grab my calculator, so 2 minus a negative 1/4, be careful with the signs, will give us 9/4. Okay. And the square root of 9/4 is 3 over 2. So 1 minus 3 over 2 is negative 1/2. So we get negative 1/2 equals negative 1/2 when we punch that in. So that works. That works. So, oops, sorry. So negative 1/4 is a solution. That checks out. Okay. So you see why you need to check these, because 1 looks like it would be perfectly good and it would work, but it doesn't. And negative 1/4 does. Okay, so shorter video on this one because we only had one topic. Okay, but these 3 types of equations will get you through section 1.6. Let me know if you have questions.